Hey guys, my name is VaulSC, hope that you are doing well. In this video we're going to be talking about Adepticon, in particular the Conquest Last Argument of Kings tournament that was played at Adepticon recently. As you guys know, Adepticon is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, tabletop wargaming event in the world. And we're going to focus on some army lists of the top first, second, and third placing players, the lists that they ran, the factions they ran, and we'll do a bit of a deep dive into their strategies and try and figure out what their thoughts were in preparation of that event and obviously their success in that. But I have to go through a few disclaimers as always before we just get into the details. So the first thing I want to say to you guys is that, you know, as somebody myself who's played tabletop war games for a really long time and played in many tournaments myself, it is a group of players who go into an event and it is a player that wins, not an army list. An army list is something that they select and it's a tool for them to use, but there are other factors that determine what the results are. This is a game of dice. There is luck involved, especially when you talk to the people who actually do win events. You know, they will tell you that, you know, sometimes there was a round where one supremacy roll or a few armor saves made the difference between winning and losing. They ended up, you know, they created the opportunity for themselves to win, but it could have gone the other way. So when you look at those end results, you've just got to remember that and realize that just one tournament doesn't really give you enough data to be, you know, that conclusive about what the meta of the game and what the situation with strategy is really like. Okay. The other thing is as well that the people that win events sometimes choose their faction and their army list based on the models they have, or based on, you know, something they've recently been painting. You might have somebody who normally plays Old Dominion, but then they, you know, buy a Wadroon army and they've painted up and they're really proud of it, even though they may feel like Old Dominion might have had a slightly better chance. For example, I'm just making this up, you know, with the factions, but you get what I'm saying here. It's not always about like the person picking the absolute strongest faction army list in every single tournament. Some people do that, but a lot of people make their list decision based on some other things. I even know a few people who go out of their way to avoid the meta stuff. They don't want to be seen as crutching on the absolute toughest stuff. I think Conquest is pretty good because the balance of it is reasonably good at the moment, so people have the freedom and the liberty to try and run the best possible army that they can. But again, models are expensive. You don't always have the ability to field the exact models that you'd like to make the strongest list as well. So ultimately, I just want you guys, if you're going to take one thing away from this video, to remember that if, you know, your favorite faction didn't appear in the top 3 of a tournament, it doesn't mean that it's a terrible faction. Or if you do see a faction appear at the absolute top podium of an event, doesn't mean it's currently the strongest faction. There are other factors. Luck is involved, you know, circumstance, players' collections, and, you know, the decisions made by people at the end of the day. Also, if you have 30 people in an event and there's one specific person who's just miles stronger than everybody else, and they happen to be running their favorite, you know, faction, even though it's not the strongest one. You know, it's about the local sort of situation and the local group of players that you have. Okay, so I just want you guys to remember all that. You know, don't be jumping to all these conclusions. If you want to be conclusive based on data, you've got to look at a lot of tournaments and a lot of factors over time. All right. Cool. So I'm glad that I got that off my chest. Now we'll go into the deep dive and everything. So Adepticon 2024, these lists have been posted online. Third place, Andrew with 100 Kingdoms. Second place, Carl with Spires. First place, Chuck with Nords. And I'm just going to go straight over to Army Builder, where I've recreated their army lists here so I can just talk about the rules a bit more closely. So this is Andrew with 100 Kingdoms coming in third. As you can see here, he's run a lot of Ashen Dawn. So he's taken 2 units of 4 here, and just purely so he can get more of them, he's taken a second warband with another Priory Commander. Note that your Priory Commander can only be the Warlord once, so he can't exactly have this warband here benefiting from the first blessing here, where they all get blessed. So he's moved over to the Chapter Mage with 1 Mercenary Crossbowman. And the thing about the Mage is that by selecting her as a Warlord, it increases the range of her spells. So when she uses School of Water for healing, she's not doing that to heal the Mercenary Crossman. The whole point of this unit is, you know, to screen if it's needed, but, you know, most of the time she's just shooting, kiss farewell, etc. But what you do is you come nearby to a unit of Order of Ashen Dawn, and then you cast, you know, the School of Water spell. You've got focus to make sure you get as many hits as possible. On a unit of Ashen Dawn with 4 stands. You're not even dealing with scaling there. So if somebody attacks this unit of Ashen Dawn with a group of bone golems or something and reduces one stand down to 1 wound left, the mage is nearby, she activates, she brings back 3 or 4 wounds, if not like all 5 of them, to top up to 6 again, and it's pretty demoralizing. So this list is just, it's a purity of purpose. It's just solely focused on Ashen Dawn. And the thing about Ashen Dawn is that when that unit first came out, people were like, what the hell is this unit? It's just bonkers strong. And they gave them Wedge. So for a period of time, we were seeing people winning tournaments with a list that had, Prior Commander, 2 Crimson Tower Knights, because the Seal Temple went out at that point, 2 units of 5 Ashen Dawn, and then the Imperial Officer. And that list seemed to show up regularly and do so well and be so difficult to deal with a lot of factions that they nerfed Ashen Dawn by taking away Wedge, and they increased the cost of additional stands by like 10 points. So that would tax people who are running 2 units of 5, because the additional 2 stands on each of those regiments equates to another 40 points. So that is a bit of a detracting thing. But of course, then you can get around it by taking like more smaller regiments here. So this unit really is, these 2 units have been taxed an effective 20 points collectively from that nerf, and they're getting by fine without Wedge, and you're still seeing a lot of Ashen Dawn here. So the other part of the problem is that this is the list that came third at the event, but there were actually a lot of other people running very similar lists. When you went around and looked at what other 100 Kingdoms players were running, a lot of Seal Temple there, a lot of Ashen Dawn. And what that is saying to us in terms of players of this competitive meta, that Ashen Dawn are still seen as the strongest thing you can do with 100 Kingdoms. Arguably, there is a list you can build where you have like these massive blocks of Household Guard, Gilded Legion, and Militia, the triple block sort of list, but it's hard to run because you need a lot of models to be able to put that list together. There's also an argument for the Goblin style Horde type army, but that is less effective now that Lights can't have a character for scoring, and how the Imperial Officer can only have Vanguard for 2 units a turn. So it comes back to Ashen Dawn being the thing, and the problem is that it's a little bit boring having to just purely build around that one build. It's also really disheartening for some factions that, maybe show up to a tournament, can't really deal with that. You imagine that you're a city-states player, you've got your Hoplites, you've got your Haspis, you've got your Thorikites, you've got your Selenoy, maybe you have 1 unit of Tharians, right? So you're thinking, yum, those Tharians are going to do great against the Order of the Ashen Dawn, and maybe you play them so well that you get the jump on the Ashen Dawn, you charge, you absolutely murder them, but then there's another 2 units of Ashen Dawn elsewhere on the battlefield, completely mopping up your army, and by the time you get to like turn 8, your Tharians are maybe getting sort of boxed in by Order of the Sealed Temple, and the rest of your army is dead. So that kind of experience can be had by players that just don't really have the cleave or the AP shooting to deal with them. The fact that this list came third tells us that they don't win every tournament, and in that sense they're not that much of a problem. But using the idea of whether something wins all the tournaments or not as the metric for something, whether that something's overpowered or not, is absolutely completely stupid in my mind. Like, as I said, there are a lot of different factors for end tournament results, and there's more than just faction balance, there's internal balance as well. Like if you're building 100 Kingdoms and you're going, okay, the most competitive list is Ashen Dawn, and as soon as you don't do that, you start giving yourself less of a chance at events. We don't really want that, guys. So I'm feeling like these guys are going to get nerfed again. I've heard some talk about, proposal from people that maybe they could be 5 attacks instead without any points change. I'd be fine with that. You could also increase the base cost of the initial group of 3 by 5 or 10 and see how that goes. But we're looking for incremental changes here more than anything, because you still want them to be monstrous. You still want them to be strong. You still want them to be the elite, of the faction. You just want them to be a bit fairer and a bit easier to deal with by a player who's playing really well to overcome them. So yeah, pretty focused list, to be honest. There's nothing completely innovative. I mean, the mage was a nice touch with School of Order. I did like that. I wouldn't run this list myself. I think that, there's going to be, if you have to play 5 games throughout an event, you only need to lose 1 game to lose the event. And if you come up against something which is really purpose-built to deal with this, then that's a problem. Okay, coming over to Carl's list here with the Spires. This is a really cool list. I really liked it. I learned a lot from going through the rules here. This, I believe, is an Underspire list where all of these types of units there, Force Grown Drones, Onslaught Drones, Brute Drones, Strix, get regeneration. So that's why you build the list around it. So all of these guys just get regeneration naturally, which is cool. So the Ferromancer is avatar projection, so he goes in one of these brute drone units here, which is nice, and I'm pretty sure if we go through these various actions and so forth, we can find things which benefit from him being upfront and in the action and giving his troops more of a chance, really. So I find that kind of cool. The Strix, what they want to do is ideally avoid getting nuked by a spell, because they're terrible against that, or getting sort of countercharged by something, because they are, 120 points is relatively cheap, but they're also very easy to kill. Ideally, you want to sort of wait to that exact right moment to march charge them into combat with like a unit of archers, and then sort of peel them off and regenerate the wounds that you do take from them, and then go somewhere else where they could be a nuisance. Otherwise, the screening and the setting up charges, etc. So I really do like the Strix being included there. More interestingly, you've got the High Clone Executor in the massive group of Force-Grown Drones. Normally, when other factions take that many stands of the same type of unit, it's very inefficient, but as we know from Spires, Force-Grown Drones are sort of designed to have such a massive unit. And the reason why you see the High Clone Executor in them instead of the Biomancer or Ferromancer, which is the normal sort of setup, he does give them Bastion, which is very, very useful for sort of stopping them from getting sort of broken and shattered by a massive, massive charge, and helps to keep them alive a little bit longer so that they can get the benefit of cascading degeneration, which is, honestly, I feel like it's an overpowered ability. Just for 30 points, giving Aura of Death 4 to your entire unit, it's really an annoying ability. It's not unbeatable, it's just not very much fun to play against. Even Disperse there, it's a bit of an afterthought. I mean, he gets to choose two tactics. Obviously, Overtax Nervous System could be useful, but I don't really think that he needs it. I mean, this unit just needs to inexorably march towards an objective zone and camp there, so that really is their job. So other characters like Ferromancer, Biomancer can sort of heal these Force-Grown Drones, but remember the Underspire is giving them regeneration, so they can at least come back slowly based on that. So if your opponent's not cutting through them quickly enough because they're dying to cascading degeneration, or they can't get through the Bastion, etc., that is really useful to bring back one stand a turn. I will also say that one of my favorite ways of dealing with Force-Grown Drones is to attack them with a high defense combat unit with a combat character, so you can constantly duel the Biomancer or the Ferromancer, but it's harder to do when the High Clone Executor is there because he's actually reasonably good in combat, especially compared to the Biomancer and Ferromancer. So it's a nice touch, really. It makes a lot of sense why he's in there. And of course, this character unlocks the Marksman clones. You've got 5 stands of them, which is nasty. That is like 20 shots at range 22 with arcing fire. If they can get onto a hill or something like that, then they can shoot over your troops with volley 3 when they're aiming, so that's very, very powerful. But when I look at the Biomancer, and you check out Grant Virulence, this is one option here, target friendly regiment within 12 inches. It's not a roll, it's not a spell, it just goes off automatically, which is kind of sickening. Gains deadly blades or deadly shots, so presumably you can use this ability on your Marksman clones, so any failed rolls of 6 is double the number of wounds taken. So that is just an absolutely fearsome unit. I'm actually really, I get chills thinking about facing that. So the Biomancer, of course, Master of Flesh gives him the chance to do 2 character actions, so 2 Ferromancies or Biomancies. So that allows you to pop off the Grant Virulence. Again, Deadly Shot's not the only option. You've got Deadly Blades, which could be very useful on this big unit of Brute Drones with the Ferromancer avatar inside of it. There's a bunch of other ones here which are also useful, so you may just be wanting to grab one of these other ones as your second option. So I think he's really helpful. I assume he goes in one of these small units here, like the Force-Grown Drones here. They could be a screening unit, or he could jump in the Bound Clones for scoring. But the point is to keep him back and can keep him casting the double Biomancy every single turn, which is really, really cool. And of course, Incarnate Sentinels, one of the better options in Spires for Cleave. Really, really strong unit, and that is one of the things that this list is missing. Like it doesn't really have a lot of cleave elsewhere here. So if you're running into a list like this, you kind of want something to be able to come in there. So you have the 4-square drones in front of the Incarnate Sentinels, for example. They get hit by the Knights, and then you charge the Incarnate Sentinels in. A list like this has got tons of defense 4, so at least you can have this unit there to try and deal with them. But overall, really cool list. It's something which rewards good strategy and good tactics and good performance, generalship on the tabletop. So I really admire that, and no surprises seeing this one come second. So the first place winner, this is by a guy called Chuck, and I am told that he is just a really good tabletop wargamer all round, and one thing you see from winning players is this idea that typically when somebody wins a lot of tournaments, they typically don't go for skew lists, which are sort of gimmicky and have like one obvious strategy that works really, really well in some situations. You typically see the best players take a list that has a bit of a toolbox, a bit of variety, a bit of diversity, a bit of finesse, really, where they don't necessarily take the strongest things available to the faction. They just take, as I said, a range of different tools and options which they can use to leverage their skill, and that's really how it's done in a lot of competitive wargaming situations. So let's have a look through it. Already, I see the 2 units of Bochos in there. I think that's a really good choice when you're in the sort of the meta of high defense stuff. So you run into the Seal Temple Ashen Dawn kind of list. The Bochos are really crucial there for getting the price of precise shot, which cuts through armor and whittles them down. You've also got the Ogres with Cleave 2 and the Ice Yacht now with Cleave 3 and the Sea Yacht now with Cleave 2. So this is the kind of army list which can deal with the heavy defense meta out there, which is proving to be a problem for some. This list absolutely has the tools to deal with that. Note that the Blooded also has the Horn and the Hunt Instinct Crow, just to add to the shooting from the Bochos, and so he's extremely scary. I do worry a little bit about scoring because these guys are lights, but then you've got 6 other scoring units when the Raiders are turned into a captain here. That's a medium unit, so that's really, really good. The Shaman, Herald of the Storm, shuts down magic. I'd be really interested to understand his thoughts there. What specifically was he really afraid of that he had to spend the points on shutting that down for a turn? I don't know. It's possibly a feeling that he was going to be running into a lot of Dwergum, and maybe in practice he felt like some of the more competent players out there that were likely to beat him would be showing up with Sorcerer Warlord on Dwergum, a couple of Sorcerers on Drakes and so forth, and just pumping out the magma spells and fireballs. And if he can have one turn where he shuts that down, the Dwergum don't generate the tokens for Tempered Creed, and they're not popping off his units of Bochosen and so forth with spells which you're going to take resolve checks against. So that's probably the thinking. We're not coming into Sorcerer Kings aren't in the meta just yet. It's probably just going to be Dwergum that he's concerned about. I suppose 100 Kingdoms can, pump out a lot of magic, but then again, they're going to be taking a lot of Ashen Dawn instead. So I feel like that's probably what the consideration was. Most interesting thing in this list for me is the Konungur and Huskarls. The Huskarls are again, they're a very beatable unit. If you attack these guys with something like a Tontor, which is Cleave 1 and Line Breaker, they're not going to survive for very long. The Konungur is not going to chop through it quickly enough, even with all of his gear here. So they have a bit of a weakness. They're not that expensive, though. So I think if you choose your target correctly with them, they're okay. And obviously this guy's an absolute beast when it comes to dueling. So he's also got the anti-shooting tech here. Again, I just can't help thinking this must be anti-Dwergum, because Dwergum have the spells, they have the shooting to kind of deal with you and blow you off the board, and moving up with your giants are going to get picked off, your ogres are going to get shot down, and then it's just going to be like a ranged attrition battle between the Bochosen and the Ballistae and the Drakes and the Fireforged, and I think the shooting and the magic makes a difference for Dwergum there, so maybe that's why. So with this Figure of the Nagelfar, you can send them out there, and that really cuts down a lot of the shooting that you'd be taking. Broken Blade's nice when you're pumping out 8 attacks. Obviously really good to get a little bit of cleave in there, as if you didn't have enough cleave already. But again, every bit of cleave matters in this current meta. You play against, again, this list here. A lot of defense, a lot of armor, a lot of wounds to chop through. This really, really helps. So I can kind of understand it. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't run this list. I think you're overdoing it with a cleave. And I don't know if Herald of the Storm gets enough utility. But hey, this guy won Adepticon, and I haven't really played at Adepticon. So he obviously knows what he's doing, and I think that we can all learn a little bit from his choices there. So this is a game that continues evolving. I have heard that they are going to be releasing a new patch soon where they're going to be changing Bloodlust and bringing in a few tweaks to Sorcerer Kings. So interested to see how that goes. I might put out a sort of a meta-analysis video at that point in time, explaining what I think each faction needs and going over the patch notes. But for now, this has been a bit of a look into some of the higher level play that we see from Conquest. Adepticon being a very serious event, and although we can't, definitively say, oh, the top 3 factions are Nord, Spires, and 100 Kingdoms. I don't believe that's the case. Those 3 players that won that event obviously deserve where they got because they're good players. If you gave them different factions, they probably also would have done well. So just never forget that. It's really about, performance on the day and about luck and about, the players' preference for what army they wanted to field at that particular time. All right, so I hope you guys got something out of this, and I'll be back soon with some more content for you. So please don't forget to like and subscribe and do all that, and let me know what you thought.